I guess first I'll just give a shout out to my 25 for 25 learning partner, Gabe. Probably most of what I'll say over the next 20 minutes will be inspired from what we have spoken about together. Also, one other note is, have you ever guys been in a Zoom where you like see two people smile at the same time because you know they're texting each other? So I think that's the best thing. I love that. So feel free to do that as much as possible because like if you don't listen, it's okay. You can still see faces of friends and say hi. So that's one word introduction. Okay, so I think we called this year developing a relationship with Hashem. I don't have the answer to that. I hope no one thought that I did, but there is someone that we're going to be looking at his work, and that is Rav Kook. So Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Cohen Kook. He was a rabbi in Yafo, and then he was a rabbi in Yerushalayim back when Yerushalayim was Palestine, British occupied Palestine. It's easy to remember his dates because he lived 70 years and is exactly split by the new century. So he was from 1865 to 1935, and an absolute legend in every sense of the word, and a very holy person. And so one of his essays is called Thirst for a Living God, God that's alive, based off a pasuk that David Melech says that David says that he yearns for God that's alive, right? Sama Elokim, Sama Nafshi Elokim Ekel Chai. He's yearning for God that's alive. So Rav Kook wants to kind of explain what that means and how we can get there. And he lays out something like a 4-step process. Pretty much his assumption is working off the fact that everyone's looking for something, some ideal, some like ism that they can live their life by. So for example, some people might say like, oh, capitalism, I'm going to live my life by capitalism. But eventually you might realize that that doesn't work for everyone in that system. So you might say, okay, I'm going to go over to, I'm going to try to live my life by communism. But you'd say, oh, that might not work also because it doesn't really leave any room for me as an individual. It doesn't encourage me. So, okay, you might kind of like go from different isms. Maybe we'll try mindfulness. And all these, he says, they're true in some form, that each one of these is saying some part that's true. But he has this really nice imagery of kind of like you're on a sea or you're in the ocean and every wave is pushing you from one wave to another. So you're riding a wave and you think like, oh, this is the wave that works. And then all of a sudden it crashes because you realize it's not inclusive. Like it doesn't work with everything. And so you're kind of crashing from one wave to the next. So if Cook says, in the second part of the essay, he says, at one point, one comes to God. One searches for God and says, maybe I can find this kind of spiritual rest. He's like, we can find rest in God. God is all-inclusive, should be able to work in every situation and every kind of experience that we have, so I'll find rest in God. So someone starts to consider, all right, like I'll kind of get into this whole religious thing, whatever that looks like. I'll start searching out God. I'll try to seek him out, so to speak. So try to like kind of see things in your life that might be different or God's hand in certain things. But he says like that gets tiring, right? It's like exhausting. He says you see even people who are tremendous scholars, Talmidei Chachamim, who have learned a lot, but they're exhausted because you're just kind of like always yearning and searching for God. And we almost feel like we just inherently come up short. Like I'm going to be able to grasp God or come close to him or have a relationship with him. So he says like, it just is so tiring. You're like, this can't be it. And that's where Rav Kook kind of moves to his 4th stage. And the 4th stage, the religious lifestyle that he imagines as being kind of like the ideal, needs a little bit of one word of introduction, which is kind of like the system that Rav Kook is working with. Pretty much the basic understanding is that we all intuit that when you're looking at me, you guys don't actually think that I'm just my body. Like you don't think that let's say I wave, someone I know does this, it's a good example. Like when I wave, you guys don't think that my hand is waving. You think I'm waving to you, right? I'm using my hand to wave to you. Or if you want to look into my eyes, like you don't actually think that I am my eyes. You're just kind of like we kind of use each other's bodies as like kind of tools to relate to each other. But we take a step back and think like, well, who am I? We kind of experience ourselves as some self, some consciousness, kind of looking out behind my eyes. Like I'm here and I'm like looking out into the world. So like when we do that, we kind of have a different perspective of what is our body doing. Like these are kind of tools that we're using, but our core, our essence of actually who we are is a consciousness. So in Hebrew, those words, we're a neshama, and kind of express ourselves through our thoughts and through our emotions, eventually to our actions. And finally, you guys see me. So me as a self, you can't see, but you can see how I express myself. So one of the big kind of mind-blowing things that I think is going to have a lot of questions will percolate after, which I hope we can try to address, is like what we are built in the image of God, right? We're built with Tselem Elohim. So what that means is that we work and we operate and we kind of animate our bodies in the same way that God works. So what that means is that God is also a self. God is an endless self, and Hashem also manifests. So what does Hashem manifest in? So this is where Cook gets to his fourth stage. And he says it's a religious lifestyle where you realize the whole world is Hashem's manifestation. God's arms and legs and kind of his expression, or our version of what would be his expression, is the world. So Hashem says you start seeing God not in kind of like this yearning for something external to you, but in that it's within everything. Like in every conversation you have, you meet someone, anything you hear, any bird chattering, or Cook says in every piece of grass, just literally through existence itself, you say, oh, there's a self that is behind, that kind of exists behind reality. Hashem is looking through, using reality as his manifestation and expression. And Cook says when you realize that, it completely changes your one's way of living life. I'll give a good example. Like, what if I said to you guys, point to the sky? So most of us like point out the window and point to the sky. Right? But the sky is no more over there than it is 1 inch in front of my eye. We say, oh, there's the sky, but it's right in front of our eyes also, just that we need some way to be able to see it. So I see Jacob Mitrani is sending me a text. So when one realizes that God is so close, this image of someone who's exhausted after spending their whole life yearning, you're not exhausted anymore. God is immanent. God wants to be involved in one's life. And so for a Cook, kind of like the highest point is when you see Hashem manifesting through everything, that you're just walking around the world and you're taking a stroll and there's no kind of like, this is my religious life, and then I'll like leave that. It's like, well, what does that even mean? Like, how limiting is that of God? Like that some place would be not God's presence, that Hashem is manifesting through everything. So I think the kind of the question that I had after I learned that was, what role does Torah play then? Because if we, if Cook is saying, and we believe that, like, one expression is that God is not in the world is in God. That's in the Sefer Nefesh Chaim. So if you really want to believe the world is in God, and which is a crazy kind of thing that takes time to meditate over and consider, so then where does like the Torah fit into that? And I think in general, actually, one point about the holidays is that we experience them very fragmented. But tomorrow night we will be will be the holiday of Shavuot, right? We're re-experiencing God teaching us the Torah. So obviously it's kind of dependent. I think we have to ask Rav Cook, like, what role is that? Why we really need that if God is really everywhere? And so I think usually we experience the holidays as fragmented. Like, I'll sit at my Pesach Seder, and then a few months from now, I'll like stay up learning all night, and then maybe end of July, I'll mourn for a day. I'll sit on the ground, and then I'll like eventually sit in a sukkah. Maybe I'll light Hanukkah candles, and then we do it all over again. These are all just like random things that kind of pop in and out every few months, and at least that's definitely how I experienced it growing up. I think like just like do these things and then kind of step back out of it. But the truth is that it's all one process of seeing the relationship, of a relationship with God. So I'll explain it like this. On Pesach is like when you first meet someone, right? The experience of first meeting someone is
1 minute.
the experience of first meeting someone is like in a very intense moment. It's like a Pesach moment is when you first meet someone. And then you get engaged, and there's dating. We can ask Jacob Mitrani what it's like to be engaged. So he knows what it's like to count down, to be a Sfira Omer Jew. And then you get to Shavuot. And Shavuot is kind of like, is the wedding. So we'll hold that for a second. What happens after the wedding is there's like the, what's it called when you, like the paradise kind of relationship where everything is going well?
Honeymoon stage.
So you're in the honeymoon stage, but eventually that kind of falls, and there's a churban, there's a destruction, right? The luchot are shattered. How do you say luchot? Tablets are shattered. It's the same day that Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. And again, so there's destruction eventually that comes with some argument, right? When you kind of end this paradise stage where everything is good, then you have to come down from that at some point. And there's a destruction. And then eventually you get to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and we say, okay, well, we'll learn how to have a relationship, when to forgive each other, to forgive ourselves. We'll learn to be in a relationship that we can like love each other, and we kind of get over the destruction. And eventually we come to Sukkot, which is kind of renewing our vows. So now when we come back to Shavuos and consider what tomorrow night is, it's the stage of a chuppah. The Jewish people are joining together with Hashem. And so if you think about, the Gemara says that Hashem took Har Sinai and suspended it over our heads. Because the chuppah, we're sitting under the wedding canopy with Har Sinai over our heads. That's the imagery. So that Gemara also needs to be explained in a few different ways. But it's a chuppah. And I think that's kind of like the core essence of the Torah, at least from some people's perspective. This is explained by someone named Yitzhak Meir Morgenstern. So pretty much that the Torah is Hashem sending us a letter. What's a letter? So the Mishnah says that we can, if you want to have a relationship with someone, the first Mishnah, Masechet Kiddushin, what do? Is that there are three ways you can have a relationship. And one of the ways is called shtar, which means document. Why? Because when you give someone a document, you give someone a gift, it's saying, here is the way that I can connect to you. That same God, this kind of religious experience where we feel like there's something beyond us that we can't tap into. Well, maybe, let's say if we feel distant, I can give you a present. And then as that present is continuously being built out, you're constantly connecting to the person who gave you the present. And that's like the light of the Torah. That's to make us feel like there's a relationship with Hashem, to make us realize Hashem wants to give us the Torah, wants to be in a relationship with us. It's a crazy thing to understand. I'll tell a quick story. So there were once two rabbis. I won't go into all the details of what their names were, etc. But anyways, they had this weekly tradition, I think it was actually monthly, that they would send each other letters. But they lived pretty far away, so what they had to do, this story has a few different permutations, but I'll say it one way that I heard it. So that what they do is they'd send each other letters, and they needed like a messenger to send the letters, because back in the day, obviously it was not so easy to, talking like 1700s here. So these two rabbis lived in a town about an hour away, and there was a forest. So the forest to get from one of the rabbis to the other had to be travailed by someone. So there was one Jew who, he decided, I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to play this role of bringing the letter from one rabbi to another rabbi. So every week he would do this, or every Friday he would take the letter from one rabbi and bring it to the other. And then by the time he got there, it was almost Shabbat, so he would stay there for the weekend. And then on Sunday he'd go back. And that was what he did week after week for many years. He would just bring these letters back and forth. He felt it's a big privilege. I'm able to provide this communication. And so one day after a lot of years of doing this, his curiosity got the better of him, and he says, all right, I got to see what they're talking about. I got to know, I got to find out what are these letters I've been delivering all these years. So his curiosity gets the better of him, and he opens up the letter, and what is it? What are the secrets that they've been so excited to get every week? The letter is blank. It's empty. So obviously he's infuriated. So I've been sending empty letters back and forth for years. It's a joke. His rabbis are taking advantage of me. Here comes the rabbi that he's supposed to give it to, and he starts yelling at him. He's like, what is this? I looked at the letter. Now, obviously he was embarrassed to say so, but he said, he was so angry. He said, I had to look at all these years, and it's empty? How could that possibly be? So he kind of nodded. He's like, yeah, I understand why you're upset. But he says, it's not always like that. Sometimes there are words. But sometimes there's nothing I need to say. And there's nothing he needs to say to me. We just want to send each other letters. That's what friends do. They want to be in touch. This is something like he calls it, he doesn't need the black fire of letters. He doesn't need the specific kind of this is the thing that I want to tell you. I just want to send you a letter. I just want the paper itself to reach you. So I think when we're learning Torah, oftentimes it feels like kind of like an intellectual thing, or maybe emotional, but at the end of the day, we kind of forget who's the source of sending us the letter? We kind of are so concerned about what's written on it, right? What are the exact details? What are the particularities that if in halacha, you want to learn exactly the laws, and those are important. But I think kind of the job and the role of tomorrow night is no mitzvah. There's no sukkah. There's no matzah we're eating. There's no Torah mitzvah. It's just Torah itself. Just to celebrate the connection and relation we have with Hashem itself. I think that's when we think about it, how can we look at the world if we don't kind of have the Torah be able to give us the glasses to look at it in the right way? And I'll just end with one more thing, that Rav Kook writes in another place that the definition of humility is when you're in the world. The definition of arrogance is when you say, I'm too cool. I'm too cool, or I'm too holy, or I'm too whatever, any excuse someone wants to give, why they're not in the world, why they're not doing things, that is some form of arrogance. The true humility is when you say, I'm in the world. We're in the world. Hashem is manifesting to us at all times. He's waving to us, just like I'm using my expression to wave. The world itself is waving to us at all times. Hashem wants to communicate with us and wants to be in a relationship with us. I think sometimes we kind of lose it. But for just one moment, if we could just take on Shavuos, on Friday morning sometime, just say, wow, I'm so fortunate that you want to have a relationship with me. And you want to look for me, and you want to develop a relationship. So that was the name, right? How to develop a relationship. So if we're looking for something external to us, we probably will never get there, and it'll probably be exhausting for our entire lives. And I think some people live, if God is external, and like really will live be tired. It's a tired way of existing. You're existing, like just one thing after the next. You're always looking. And I think the way that you can have real kind of menuchat nefesh, real kind of satisfaction, is when you just realize that Hashem is within us. Hashem's trying to express himself through all of us, that we're all, each and every one, so kind of like the fingers, something like that, some expression of God in the world. And B'ezrat Hashem, this year we should have a refuah shlema for the whole world. And also Gula Shlema, where everyone comes to recognize this truth that Hashem is kind of expressing himself through everything. And we should be fortunate to be able to see it in our days.
If the Hashem, is within us, why is it not innate? Why does it seem hard to connect with something that is so in front of us and just so it is us? So why is it not automatic?
Right. True. It's hard. Gil's singing a song from someone named Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. It's a good song. And the point of the song, it's not actually a song, he actually just wrote it. The point of the song is saying kind of specifically in a place of these perceptions that we have as if things not. So that's kind of like the novelty of God creating the world, is that that's not easy, it's not simple. But only when it's hard can it be good. Meaning only one has to search for it and kind of work on it. That's that discloses God's existence in a much more real way. Like a much more, if you can only find God when it were easy and it was simple, like we knew this at all times. So what's the point of creating anything other than for there to be anything separate from God? So I think it involves a larger discussion. But I think one of the ways to start is consider maybe there's a reason that growing and kind of working towards it makes God discloses God's presence in an even more real way.
Mm.
Yeah,
can I comment on that?
Yeah, please.
It's kind of what I was going to say before, is that when the Jews were in the desert and there was Hashem gave us the man all the time, and we saw Hashem's presence all the time, we might think that that's the ideal because Hashem's there all the time and it's so obvious. But that's the whole point as to why now, when God isn't obvious in this world, this is the ideal, because if it was obvious, there would be no doubt. From the doubt comes the true emunah.
I was literally just listening to a Torah about that yesterday, how in the desert, and it's I'm not going into all the details of why it's like this, but in the desert, they were considered with Hashem panim be'achor, face, not face to face, face to back, basically. But now in these later generations, when there's all this hiddenness, basically exactly what you're saying. Now we're in this place of panim and panim, face to face, and obviously that seems so counterintuitive. What Gabe was saying, so why don't we feel it? That's the question. But I was hearing exactly what you just said over. I was hearing it from Weinberger, exactly the way you just said it. So it's very the same analogy to the Jews in the desert. I don't know. It's very interesting stuff. Only Gabe could come with fire questions like that. It's been a
while. All right, it's almost 2:00, so I don't want to make anyone feel obligated. I hope you guys chatted in the Zoom chat. It's the best time. And I wish you guys all a Chag Sameach. You have a really amazing celebration, and hopefully we can all kind of, including myself, hopefully all internalize in this and kind of experience it in a very emotional way and really live it out over the Chag.